Jacob Burton here from StellaCulinary.com, and in this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to make a pan-roasted pork tenderloin with brandied cherries and basil sauce. And although it looks beautiful and tastes delicious, this is actually an extremely simple dish that anyone can make. Now here I have a couple pork tenderloins. Sometimes at the top portion here, you have a side muscle that you want to remove, which isn't shown. That's just going to allow for more even searing. Now you also have this piece of silver skin on the top that you need to remove by running your knife underneath the silver skin. My preferred method of doing this is just sandwiching that silver skin in between the cutting board and my knife blade and kind of flexing my knife blade towards the silver skin, which allows for a nice even removal without chunking the tenderloins. Now, once you trim the tenderloins of excess fat and connective tissue, you want to season liberally on both sides with freshly cracked black pepper and kosher salt and place into a gallon zip-top bag. Now to this bag, you're going to add a half a tablespoon of granulated sugar, and this is going to help to cut and balance our 3/4 cups of brandy, and it's the high alcohol content in the brandy, which is actually going to marinate and tenderize our pork. Now, I'm going to submerge this Zip-Loc bag, which is a cool little trick. Anytime you marinate something in a Zip-Loc bag, if you submerge it into a bowl full of water or a sink full of water, you can use that water to press out all the air bubbles in the bag before sealing it. And this is just going to give you a more even contact of your marinade to the product in the bag. So you want to marinate this for about an hour to 3 hours tops. Next, you want to de-stem all of your cherries, and we're aiming for about 2 cups of cherries pitted here. So you just want to take your paring knife and cut your cherries in half and remove the pit. And also half a yellow onion that we're going to dice and set aside and use that later for flavoring in our sauce. About 15 to 20 fresh basil leaves. I'm going to take half, roll them up, and cut them into a fine chiffonade. And the other half, I'm just going to rough chop. After at least an hour of marination, you want to remove the pork tenderloins and pat dry on paper towels, reserving the brandy marinade and mixing it with half a cup of cold water. And this is going to tame the flame up later on when we use it to deglaze our pan. Now here we have a large skillet that we're going to heat over high flame. Now notice if I flick in some water, how if the pan's hot, it just kind of sizzles away like that. But it's still not fully charged with heat yet. The pores haven't closed. Now when you flick in the water and the water starts to bounce around in the pan like mercury and doesn't sizzle off, you know the pan is fully charged with heat and it's ready for searing. It's at this time that you want to add enough cooking oil to the bottom of the pan to lightly coat it. And notice when I place the pork tenderloin in the pan how it freely slides around like it's a non-stick surface. That's because we took the time to properly charge our pan with heat. Now you want to sear the pork tenderloins on both sides until they are a dark golden brown and remove to a plate and set aside. Immediately throw in your diced yellow onions, and sometimes the yellow onions will have enough moisture to release into the pan and deglaze that, those little brown bits that are stuck to the bottom. If it doesn't, just throw in a 1/4 cup of warm water. It'll generate steam, and you can scrape off all that nummy brown stuff, that fond that is on the bottom of the pan. Now, notice at this point, the pork tenderloins are pretty rare. When we squeeze them, they're squishy, they're not very responsive, they don't bounce back. So remember that visual cue because we're going to revisit it in a few minutes. Now, once your onions have browned sufficiently, you want to turn the flame off on your pan, add your brandy and water mixture, and when you turn the flame back on, don't be surprised when you get a little whoosh and it's going to give you a flame. Have a tight-fitting lid sitting next to the stove in case your flames get out of control. Now, after that flame burns off, you want to add your 2 cups of pitted cherries and then reduce the liquid down until it's almost gone. Now, at this point, I have a roasted homemade chicken stock on the stove, which I'm going to defat. And this is just because I had this laying around. If you don't have your own roasted chicken stock, just buy some from the store, buy a good organic brand, and this dish will still turn out great. And add 1.5 to 2 cups of your roasted chicken or store-bought chicken stock to the pan and bring to a simmer. Combine together a tablespoon of water with a 1/4 teaspoon of cornstarch to make a slurry. Add that to your sauce, bring to a simmer, and then you want to reduce the heat to medium and place your pork tenderloins back into a gently simmering sauce that you've created and continue to rotate and cook until your desired finish temperature is achieved. Now, I like my pork mid-rare, so see how I'm pressing it here? Now it's a little bit more responsive. It's bouncing back at me. That's telling me that I have a nice mid-rare center. And don't be scared of pink pork. Trichinosis hasn't killed anyone for a very long time. Now, once your pork is done, you want to remove the pan from the heat, add in that chopped basil, and a pat of butter. And you want to swirl that in, and that fresh basil is going to bring a great flavor to our sauce. Taste for final seasoning. Now, when I tasted this, I said, hey, it could really use some acidity to brighten everything up. So I just added about a tablespoon of red wine vinegar to taste. Now, for plating, if you're doing this family style for a large dinner, you can go ahead and just take a platter, lay your sauce on the bottom of the platter into an even layer, slice the pork tenderloin into thin slices and shingle them on top of the sauce. And then you want to go back and garnish the tenderloins with the basil chiffonade. It's that fresh basil is going to play so nicely with the sweetness of the cherries in this dish. Now, for a more composed plate, if you're going to do this dish as an appetizer as part of a multi-course tasting menu, just lay the sauce down in the center of a tasting plate, cut the pork into medallions, and then garnish with your basil chiffonade. For more information, including related video techniques and a text version of this recipe, check out this episode's show notes at stellaculinary.com/CT17.